Hello everyone and welcome to Hearts of Iron 4 with me. My name is Spirhat and I will be playing as Ethiopia in 1936. A brief history into the affairs of this particular war that we are going to cover is called the Italian War on Ethiopia, which was basically an attempt by the Italian state, led by Benito Mussolini, to conquer and colonize the lands of Ethiopia, which was the only sole country in Africa that avoided colonialism largely by European nations. Ethiopia was a monarchy that was heavily under-equipped and not so modernized than, let's say, the Italian counterparts. A small distribution of the soldiers would identify that the Italians were supreme and that the Ethiopians generally lacked support. Historically, Ethiopia failed to win the war as Italy pushed harder and harder into its capital, Addis Ababa. In this session of this video game, we will attempt to go through the entire duration of the Hearts of Iron 4's historical progress, that is accurate to some extent, in which we will attempt to win the war and establish a communist government in Ethiopia, which will be obviously called the People's Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and the leader will be changed from Haile Selassie, who was the emperor, into a communist ruler, and we will win over Italy, and we will kick them out of the area and establish our own power, in which we will, throughout the focus tree that focuses on communism, we will attempt to establish a great African Union to further attempt to establish a Pan-African state in Africa. Hearts of Iron 4 obviously has various ways in which you can control and obviously lead the soldiers and the military armed forces. The first one is you need to make research. So we will attempt to push for support weapons and also perhaps maybe come up with an advanced, better equipment, better rifles. And then we can basically go and establish civilian factories because we lack civilian factories. So it says that it's going to be finished in 1965. That's how backward and underdeveloped Ethiopia is. I'm sure Italy has enough factories. If you can see here, it says that Italy has about 15 to 27 civilian factories. That means that they are better equipped and they can basically push harder and harder because there's, as you can see, their army is just superior to us. So if you ask the question, how are we going to win the war? It's very simple. We first have to understand the terrain of Africa, specifically this part of Africa. It's called the Horn of Africa. As we can see, red stands for an area that is generally desert. So it's very clear, it's flat, it's heavily difficult to basically fight or move there. As you can see, this area stretches all the way to the hills, which is the yellow color, which identifies these areas to be hilly, or at least have a lot of hills. And then we can go extend beyond it and reach the capital city, Addis Ababa, and says that this area is mostly mountainous. And obviously this area is a hill, this is a desert, and this area is a bit hill as well. So I generally, the way in which I win as Ethiopia is through giving, making sure that I understand the terrain. So as we can see, we have soldiers, we have divisions here that are ready to take combat against the Italians, who are definitely going to push. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to select this entire area of soldiers with these support, let's say, soldiers in the capital area, and then I will make an army. Now these entire divisions, which are 7, are now under the control of one army, but it lacks a commander. So what we're going to do is basically click on this to assign a military commander. Now, each of the commanders have a specific way, a specific type of skill. For instance, Imro Haile Selassie, which is obviously related to the emperor, it has two skills, which means that he's distributed his skills into two for attacks, so he has a lot of experience in attack, let's say, and also in defense, so his defense is highly powerful as well. This is with regards to planning speed and how quickly they can adopt to the terrain, and this is for supply consumption. The higher these points, the better and well-mannered more they are. For instance, the general, Soyom Mengesha, I hope that was a good pronunciation, has 3 skills in defense, which means his defense is highly more powerful than Imro Haile Selassie. I usually go with Seyon, and what I do is that I basically go into this battle plan tab bar. This is where you basically command the general to understand the rules of war. This is called the fallback line. It basically entails to the general that there is a specific line that he needs to defend at all costs. Even if the enemy were to breach an area of the line, he has to come with every point and attack and reclaim the territory. We recently said that we are going to follow the terrain. So what I'm going to do is that basically I'll form a line in the hill area and I will abandon these areas. Now, obviously in real life this is a big no-no, as when you lose territory it just identifies that, it just says that you've lost the war, especially when there is a city here called Walwal, that if I lose, I will lose 1 victory point and the Italians will gain 1, which might change the balance of war, the status quo. This is the Italians, this is ours. As you can see, the Italians have about 168,000 to 368,000 troops. Meanwhile, they only have 105,000. So, again, this doesn't even give you any hope. But what I'm going to do is that I will basically keep the fallback line and I will extend to the entire mountainous area. Now, here's another thing. This area, obviously, as you can see, is a river. So if an enemy division were to control this province, if they attack this area, it would be very difficult for them to win because of the river, as it obviously delays the soldiers advancing into this area. So now we have taken care of that. What happens is that the general will order the divisions to fall back and create a line of defense here, which is going to be much better, honestly. Now, in here it's a little bit more difficult because this area is heavily mountainous. It's very difficult to capture these areas if you do not have a plan that is acceptable to the terrain. So what I usually do is that I select the entire divisions in this area and I form one army. And I usually give command to Imro Haile Selassie, who is one of the top commanders. Again, I will, one of the reasons I've tried many times, one of the ways in which I definitely can win is that I also fall back here. But in here it's very, very, very sensitive because these areas are integral to Ethiopia. As you can see, this province has 3 cities with high victory points. If they take Aksum, Adwa, and Machale, that means that they have about 4 victory points, that the Italians could win the war if they push further. But my plan is that I create a fallback line the same as the previous one, and I extend it from Gondur all the way into this area, which is basically entrenched by a river and a lake, and then I extend it to Desi. This is going to be the line of defense. All of these soldiers will retreat back to this area, and as you can see, there are these 3 divisions here. I usually just separate them into 1 and 2, and I just assign 1 to General Haile Selassie, and I select the rest ones and I make a new commanding officer. The reason why I do this is because, if you look at this small area, it's called the Sultanate of Ausa. Now, the Sultanate of Ausa is an independent country, as you can see. It's not under the effect of neither me nor Italy, or France, or the United Kingdoms, which are colonial governance here. What I do usually is that I make sure I inform the commanding officer here that they will have a line of offensive. If by any chance Italy decides to annex Ausa and Ausa joins Italy, if they do so, which will put us in a heavily sensitive and awkward situation because the Italians can just ravage in and just take Addis Ababa in a matter of days. So what I do is that I make sure that these two divisions are well observant and are very aware of this entire area, so that in the future we may have a point and attack Ausa, and if we do so, I can inform Emperor Haile Selassie to extend his line all the way to Ausa as well, which, as you can see, it's a mountainous region. We can have a good defense. The Italians will not have any chance because they will attack from the desert, and you can only imagine how will they take this area. So it comes to the last point, the end of this entire instruction, is that winning a country or winning a war with a country that is heavily under-equipped and backward against a colonial state with a massive army and a high infrastructure and industry depends on how you communicate and understand the environment. So Ethiopia is mountainous, largely, except from these areas, which are ethnically Somali. A lot of these people here, they're mostly Somali. Is that if I understand the terrain, I will definitely have an advantage. Now, if the war begins, usually what the AI does with Italy is that they attack and they push all the way to the river. So they capture this area, this province, and this province too, and these areas. So they form a line right here against my line here. Now here's a good situation. They're cut by an entire river all the way to here. This province is well defended by a mountainous region, and this area as well. And the only way that the Italians can attack is through the heavily mounted terrain here, which it's very difficult for them to take, again, because I've entrenched my soldiers, which means that they are well equipped and defensible. They know the area, they know it very well. And upon that, they will also attack from the desert, which is, again, a big no-no in military, because, as you can see, it says here that division attrition, chance to get sick, and supply truck attrition is higher than, let's say, the mountainous area, which I have a lot of defense. And I will let them to keep attacking, because the AI in Hearts of Iron is very much focused on invading, is that they will do so until the point that they exhaust themselves. And that's where I basically begin the renewed offensive operation, which means that I basically push back and take over Eritrea and take over Somalia and force the Italians into negotiating peace. And that's how we win against Italy, and that's how we establish a communist government. If you by any chance plan to play this game, if you play as Ethiopia, then I recommend you rewatch this whole video. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a very wonderful time.